Yeah, take care of that in a bit. All right, pretty much today's going to be a foot wedge masterclass, trying to condense everything into 1 hour and have you guys try a couple of different movements to see how it works. All right, so number one, I got to pay some respect to the OG, Gary Ward. He's the founder of Anatomy in Motion. And he's a guy that made all the foot wedges and come up with this entire paradigm of how to look at the body. Nothing groundbreaking, it's just physics and biomechanics, but he's the one that really put together what it looks like in a closed chain fashion and how all of the joints start to move differently based on how the foot moves. The origin story is that he's a ski boot fitter, and he put little wedges inside people's ski boots and have them ski. And what he found was that some people come back and say, hey, I feel amazing this ski session. Like my neck was good, my shoulders good, everything was just good. And then there are some people that come back and say, I feel absolutely awful, like everything got worse. So what he found is that there's something going on with the way the foot touches the ground that really have an effect through the whole body. And that took him on the rabbit hole of looking at biomechanics and figuring out this whole entire paradigm. So big respect to Gary. And today, we're going to talk about how we use some of his things into the way that we look at performance and rehab. So number one, nervous system is our big approach. I want to talk a little bit about the nervous system and neuroscience framework. It's like your nervous system is like a GPS. You put in an address, it's going to find the most efficient possible path for you to get from point A to point B. If there's a highway, it's going to take that highway every single time. But if the highway is closed, you're going to find your way around a bunch of different detours. It's going to take you through a bunch of different side streets, and you're still going to get from A to B, but it's going to take you a lot more time. It's going to be a lot less efficient. And over time, you kind of get stuck here. Because over time, let's say your GPS don't update, you're stuck taking these side streets, even though the highway is completely open, but you won't know that until you update your system. And that's where we see a lot of people run into some problems, is that they have developed all these different compensations over time, and now they're moving very inefficiently. So how does it look like in a real life example? So let's say 10 years ago, someone's skiing, and they fell on the right hip. So now your right hip is hurt. So what happened now? So the nervous system calls for a big meeting, a meeting kind of like this. Everyone is here. You have a head, you have a shoulder, you have a rib cage, you have a hip, you have a knee. And the whole mission is simple. Say, hey, we need to protect the right hip, but still allow the body to move somehow. That's a whole strategy that it's going to use. So what's the best strategy to offload the right hip? Well, first thing you want to do, you want to hike up the right hip, right? Because you want to offload that, so you're going to hike it up. But if you hike it up, what's going to happen? Your whole body's going to shift this way, but you still need to be relatively upright. So the next step is you're going to have to side bend your rib cage back this way. But now your head is facing that way. You still need to face above. So now you have to tilt your head back to the left. And now there's going to be a change in your foot pressures. Because you hike this hip, something's going to happen down below. And now you have this limp. That's what it looks like. That's all to protect that right hip. Now, let's talk about this. How would you position your feet to offload the right hip? Chris? Externally rotate, yeah, okay. Would you want to place more weight on the outside of your foot or more on the inside of your foot? Just a guess. Who says outside? Outside feet, okay. Inside? Okay, inside, okay. So, I mean, it could be either way, but most of the time, it's going to be outside. Because if you want to increase the height of this hip, you're probably going to want to do this to your foot to create more height. So you mean on the outside of your foot, most of the time. But I've seen situations someone would just go like this. They just don't compensate as well. So you would see athletes who's very high level, they're still going to have compensations, they're just better at compensating. So with that strategy of upping the right hip and everything curved this way, even when you're better, and if you don't place that big toe joint back onto the ground and you're still a little bit more towards the outside of the little toe joint, now it's going to change the way you subconsciously do other activities. Now when you squat, you might subconsciously squat over to the left. And these things you will see in your clients all the time. and you can tell them to move over to the right, but they're never going to be able to do it if they never can feel the pressure evenly across both feet. So these are compensations, or what I like to call them detours, just a roundabout way to get from A to B, and this is A, this is B. A to B can be as A and B. This is a journey that you can map out for every single motion in the human body. So what do we do about this? We update the GPS, we find that highway again. Because if you're driving and you're taking all these detours and your friend is next to you and you say, hey, you know the highway's open, and he'll tell you, you take a left, you're on a highway, and now you get there in like half the time. Well, of course, next time what you're going to do, you're going to take that same highway again, because now that you know it exists. But how do you know to take it if you never knew it exists in the first place? That is what we're going to be doing today, is to help you guys see if you can find the highway to how your body moves. So the feet, we do a lot of stuff with the feet, and it's gotten a lot more popular. I've seen a lot more people, influencers online, actually starting to get around to recognizing this as a very viable way to help people move. So the first interaction to the ground is a closed chain biomechanic. Closed chain just means that your distal extremity is touching the surface. So if your foot's on the ground, it's closed chain. And that changes everything. If your foot is off the ground, it's open chain. You learn this in anatomy books, it's flexion, extension, all of that. But for pronation and supination to happen, which is the 2 foot shapes, it can only occur in closed chain. And we're going to map out how that works in the whole body. Last time we were here, we were looking at the closed chain biomechanics of the upper body. Now we're tuning into the lower body. But in reality, they're all connected. It's all one paradigm. Couple motion, we explored this last time, but I want to reiterate, is simply when one joint moves, there's a predictable manner for how another joint is supposed to move in accordance to produce the most efficient movement pattern. And when it doesn't happen, your movement efficiency is going to start declining, your force capacity is going to decline, and you're going to develop more compensation patterns. So what happens when you normalize couple motion? Well, more efficient movement strategy, better force capacity, and a likely decrease in tension and pain. And when you restore couple motion at the foot, there's a whole domino effect up the entire body. So this principle right here is really important, because you can have someone who express really weak musculature in certain movements, but is it because their muscles are actually weak, or because those joints aren't placed in a position where those muscles can be strong? Like if you have a biceps that's stuck like this all day, and you say, oh yeah, you got some weak biceps. It's like, well, no, because their elbows is stuck in that way. The bicep have no choice but to exhibit that amount of strength. But if you have that full range of motion back, it's going to look a lot different. So there's only 2 shapes to the feet. There is what we call pronation and supination. And a pronation is a force absorption. It's like a trampoline. You want to make a trampoline work, you throw something at it heavy so it absorbs the force. That's what pronation does, it absorbs the force. And then there's a mobile, there's a rigid lever, which is supination, which the foot stiffens up and then produce force. You need both. Most people are lacking, I would say, more pronation. And I would even argue pronation is even more important than supination. Why? Because you need pronation for supination to happen. It's sort of like you need elbow extension for elbow flexion to happen. If you don't have elbow flexion, well, you only get this much, right? You can't get flexion without extension. Same thing, you can't get supination without pronation. So even for people with flat feet, we will still guide them into better pronation mechanics. So Adrian, you want to go through just the mechanics here? So Brandon, if you don't mind just coming down below here. And you guys can gather around, because we need the floor for all of this. The camera. Thank you, Brandon.
So for all this to happen, we're going to look at it in the sagittal plane, but for all this to happen, there's a certain sequence of movements that these bones have to take place, and it has to happen in order for proper pronation mechanics to happen. So if we look at it, we could split the foot into 3 different parts. The rear foot, which is the calcaneus, the midfoot, which is these mid bones right here, and then the forefoot, which is these metatarsals, and then your fingers, your toes. So the first part is the calcaneus, the heel bone, super important. If that doesn't move, none of this is really going to matter, because everything else is going to lock up and you're not going to get the appropriate mechanics you need to get. So a simple way to just test it, how we do, is just have a person put one foot in front of the other and see how their knee goes forward, and you can see how well the heel's moving and the rest of the foot. So some people with like really high arches, you might notice that their foot might never move, so we need to encourage some maybe pronation mechanics. But for the heel, we need to see the heel plantar flex or tip down and evert, so down and out like this.
We just do sagittal for now.
Yep. So just tip down, so like plantar flexion, so just a tip down. And after that, this midfoot also spreads out. You can see these bones starting to spread out, and they'll go down. And the midfoot or the forefoot will dorsiflex. These toes will actually come up in order for the toes to stay on the ground. So it's like a twist, I would say. So what happens one way, the opposite happens the other way. So if this heel bone tips down, this forefoot, midfoot has to tip up or dorsiflex in order to keep the big toe on the ground. And that's how we'll get that pronation of that foot.
Right. It's very easy to think about. Just if this goes down, but the floor is underneath you, that means this has to come up. That's what closed chain is. It's physics, it's mechanics, but we just got to look at it a little bit differently. Because open chain, pronation, supination does not happen in open chain. But what's crazy is these short foot exercises is pretty much doing an open chain exercise, but you're on the ground. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. So short foot exercises aren't really the key to getting better supination. Little caveat here. Next one, we're going to look at these. Oh, we looked at the okay, now we got pronation. Now we look at supination, which is what's going on the other direction, the arching of the foot.
Yeah, it's exactly the opposite of what pronation is. And I also forgot to mention, when we get this full pronation to happen, what happens on the underside of these joints, all these joints open up relatively and get a nice stretch and length into all these muscles and the tissues on the underside of the foot, and then the top part of the foot, all these joints close down. That's super important, and that's that pronation shape. And the opposite happens when we're creating that rigid lever or that arch shape back up. So now instead of this heel bone tipping down, it'll have to tip up or dorsiflex, while these toes, the forefoot has to tip up to keep these toes down on the ground before it's getting ready to push off. And now all these joints on the bottom of the foot close, and all the joints on the top of the foot open up. So we're getting length into these top part of the foot, the extensors and all that, and then these closing down of these joints. So it's the exact opposite in the sagittal plane for supination in order for you to push off.
Right. And we're going to run through the other planes real quick. So this is frontal plane.
Frontal plane, look at it from the back with the heel. The heel, besides it tipping down, it also needs to tip out a little bit, and that's eversion of the calcaneus. And what that allows is this midfoot to drop and invert. So it's the opposite. So if this is eversion, the midfoot has to go into inversion in order to stay on the ground, and the toes evert as well, just to keep everything on the ground. Otherwise, we'll lose contact with the big toe or the pinky toe.
It just has to crisscross. Action has to be opposite of one another because it's on the ground. Mm-hmm. And then we'll look at the supination.
Supination, it's the pushing off. So now instead of the calcaneus tipping down and out, it will actually tip up and in. So you'll see this kind of scooping in of the heel. It's if you think about when you see someone doing a calf raise in an open chain, if that heel goes inward, that's a supination mechanic. And then the midfoot has to twist out, and then the toes twist back in. So again, it's that crisscross effect going from the rear foot to the midfoot to the forefoot.
Transverse plane real quick.
Transverse plane, best way to look at it is from the top. This is where you see some rotations happening. So from the top, you see the rear foot go into more internal rotation, and then the forefoot and the toes follow into more external rotation or abduction, which is away from the body. And it's kind of more like a towel wringing out kind of. So if this rear foot internally rotates as we flatten out, these toes and midfoot externally rotate or abduct.
Mm-hmm. And supination is just the opposite. We're not going to bore you with all the details around it. Just right the opposite direction.
Yep. External rotation, internal rotation in the front and the midfoot. Yep.
Cool. So now, everyone take off your shoes. This is when I get to the more active part, because you guys need to feel all these motions happening in your body. All right. We'll wait for everyone. All rise. All rise. All right, so first move we're going to do, we're going to bring our center of mass, keeping your knees relatively straight. We're going to bring our center of mass to the front of our body. And keep your feet about like, there we go, perfect, good. You're gonna have your center of mass go to, okay, sure. Go to the front of your body, all right? The question I'm gonna ask you guys now is your foot flattening out, pronating, or is it supinating? Pronating, okay. Just kind of keep in your head, I'll ask again. Now we're gonna go bring our center of mass behind towards the heel. Tell me if your foot is supinating or pronating. Supinating, okay. So now you understand. That's all I want you guys to get. As your body weight goes to the front, the foot pronates. As your body weight comes to the back, your foot supinates. Now, next we're gonna same thing. Bring in the weight to the front is a pronation of the foot. Bring in the weight to the back is supination. Now what's happening to the rib cage? When you bring your weight to the front, what's happening to the rib cage? It comes up. Now if you bring your weight to the back, what's happening to the rib cage? It depresses, right? So now we can map out a rib cage motion to the foot. So if someone's lacking a lot of rib cage motion here, maybe, and you're tackling that rib cage all day, you're tackling the shoulder blade all day, maybe it's a closed chain mechanics. Maybe a foot that's stiff doesn't allow this motion to occur naturally in their body. Right here, you guys are right. Flexion, well, whatever, tipping up, tipping down, matches with what's going on with the foot. So foot wedges. So each one of you guys will borrow a set of these.
Yeah. I'll pass
Yeah, you can pass it around, and I'll show you guys what's going on. So, what are these foot wedges for? The foot wedge is going to help us create better mechanics in the feet.
Yeah.
Supination and pronation mechanics. Let's see what else I have in here. So these are all different ways that we can use foot wedges. And we're going to go through a lot of them today for you guys to experience in your body. See if you move a bit differently just from changing your sensory feedback from the ground.
There you go.
So a heel wedge here, this will encourage
There you go.
this heel bone to go into a plantar flexion.
There you go.
Like that. So it's going to encourage a bit of that sagittal plane motion, and we can encourage a bit of that frontal plane motion going this way, or a transverse plane motion. You guys don't have to mess with it yet. We're going to be doing so in a bit. And if we have a wedge here, we can encourage motion in the forefoot. So if a foot is stuck in any of these planes, we can see what's going on in the rest of the body. We might start to see some change in the shoulder. We might start to see some changes in the rib cage. And if we change how this foot moves, we might have a shot at changing how the rest of the patterns start to change as well. So these are the ways that we can use the wedges. And this is wedge position to encourage supination of the foot. And don't worry, we're going to go through majority of these today. So first thing, we're just going to explore some sagittal, what we call cogs. Cogs means when one part moves, another part moves in an expectable manner. So let's start with just an anterior posterior tilt. So just do an anterior tilt, just roll your hips down, and then do a posterior tilt, and just go back and forward, and back and forward. Who's getting stuck in one other direction? Maybe not. Just kind of notice how it feels, right? And now we're going to put some wedges on our feet, and we're going to recheck. So if we put a wedge on the heel, that's going to put, everyone can put a little bit of wedging underneath the heel. You don't have to do a lot, maybe like a third of the way. It's good.
These are the
just
green ones.
the two green wedges underneath the heel.
And you just go like a little bit. So like go like a third of the way. Yeah, so you don't need that much.
So now, with a calcaneus tipped into plantar flexion, what that's going to encourage is pronation, right? And when we go into pronation, forward weight goes over here, what does that encourage? A rib cage up and up anterior pelvic tilt. So now we have some heel wedge, and you do some anterior pelvic tilt and posterior pelvic tilt, maybe you start to feel different in how much range of motion you might have in the anterior pelvic tilt. Or maybe you might experience some better rib cage upward rotation here. Just a little check. Now, if we take some wedge and we wedge the big toe joint, let's say we put a black wedge here, and we'll put 2 green wedges on the other side. And then we'll try it again.
Nice. Yep.
And we'll just see how this feels for your body. So for me, I feel like in post tilt, a bit better here. Why? If I bring my weight to the back, I'm post tilting, and when I'm post tilting, I have a supination foot. But if my big toe keeps coming off the ground, it's going to be tough to really get that post tilt properly. So if I anchor my big toe joint here, I might just encourage a little bit more posterior tilting of the pelvis, and I might encourage a little bit more depression of my rib cage. And I might even get some more anterior tilt, because now I'm getting more into pronation as I go into an anterior pelvic tilt. So there are ways we can use these wedges for unlocking the hip, unlocking the shoulder, everything else. Now, wedge inside the heel. This is more of a supination mechanic, because as we posterior tilt, we need to supinate our foot. So having some wedging on the inside, maybe we start to encourage a little bit more posterior tilt. Inside heel.
Yeah. You go this way. Set your other foot up right there. Now see if it's easier to post tilt.
There you go. Okay. Does anyone notice a difference already in how they're moving the pelvis, just based on these wedge shapes and positions? Yes. Okay. Huge? All right. Cool. Let's take a look at rotation. There's 3 planes. The transverse is also frontal. We're going to skip frontal because it's actually the most complicated planes of motion to correct, but transverse is very easy to recognize. So everyone is just standing out of the wedge right here. If we rotate to the left, you might notice how your feet has to correspond. If you rotate to the left, you're going to have a pronation on the right, a supination on the left. And if you rotate to the left, you're just going to get the exact opposite. Right? Now, you're going to put your hands right here, and we're just going to rotate the pelvis towards one direction as far as you can. I kind of see how that feel, and then rotate the other direction and see how that feel. And just notice if one side feels easier than the other side. Now, if we rotate to the left, so everyone rotate to the left right now, and just kind of recognize how well you're going to the left. Now we're going to add some wedges. So we put a wedge on the left big toe, just like this, just a little bit here on the left big toe joint. Just a little bit here, don't need a lot. Now, keep yourself here and rotate your pelvis to the left. Do we feel more rotation going towards that left side? Because we are effectively getting better supination mechanics on the left, which is what we need for a left pelvic rotation. And if we put a wedge on the lateral right heel at the same time, lateral right heel and left big toe joint, and we hold on to our chest, and now we rotate the pelvis to the left.
Yep.
For me, I just unlocked so much more rotation to that left, because I'm encouraging the exact foot positions I need to be in to facilitate a left pelvic rotation. And this is how we use these wedges to regain motion. And here's the cool part. If you take yourself off the wedge and do it again, you might maintain a good amount of that new range of motion without having to rely on these wedges. This is where that detour GPS analogy comes in. When you find the highway, when you rode the highway again, you remember it, because it was so nice to not have to go through these side streets your nervous system would try to take that weight over and over again. So these wedges are just a way to help remind us that they exist. Same thing for the right rotation. Now, hands right here, and rotate your pelvis to the right. And just notice how much range of motion you're getting, or how free it feels, or like, ooh, do I feel something in my back, right? Now, we're gonna put a wedge inside the right heel, like that. So we're encouraging supination on the right foot, and we're gonna rotate our pelvis to the right. And you might start to notice a little bit better rotation to the right, okay? Another wedge position we can use is a left big toe joint at 45 degrees. So we take here and we slip it at a 45-degree angle on the left. That is a transverse plane wedge. We're unlocking that midfoot now. We're gonna rotate over to the right and see how much range you start to get. Big time, right? A lot more range going that way. So what that tells me, if you unlocked a lot of range with these certain wedge positions, maybe we need to change how the foot opens up in that specific way. So maybe we need to work on that left forefoot to open up, or we have to encourage some more supination on the right. It's a combination of two. Guess what? We're gonna try both of them. And we can encourage these type of movements, patterns, in the way we train clients as well. There's ways to do lunges, squats that encourages supination versus pronation of one foot versus the other. Now, we're going to look at a couple motion in a closed chain and how it translates up the entire body. So I'm going to walk through the nerdy stuff first. So with a pronation mechanics, we're going to get a foot pronation. We're going to get tibial internal rotation, femoral internal rotation, knee flexion, hip flexion, anterior pelvic tilt. It's a lot, but I'm going to break it down to one at a time. So we have, I'm going to take off my socks. Y'all can see. So if I take a foot here and I bring my knee forward, if my foot, can we get a model of the foot? Is that the left foot? Perfect. Can we just put it down like right there so we can almost see like a side-to-side comparison? All right. So if I go bringing my knee forward, my calcaneus start to tip down, tibial internal rotation, my knee's starting to come in. Femoral internal rotation, anterior pelvic tilt, it's all happening. Rib cage elevation. Just like how we predicted what would happen if our center of mass go in the front of our body, this will come up, this will go down. This is all happening right here. Pronation mechanic. If you guys get nothing at all today, is that when you have your clients go into a lunge, don't tell them to put their knee straight. Tell them to allow that knee to swivel in towards that big toe joint so they can have proper pronation mechanics. So if you guys go ahead and try to bring that knee forward, let's see what happens. Does it swivel in, or does it migrate out to the side, or does it go completely straight? And do you feel a pinch in your ankle or some kind of discomfort there? Okay? Just kind of experience it in your own body. All right? So some of you might notice that my knee's completely going straight, or I feel really imbalanced. I don't feel smooth at all. Now we're going to take a wedge, and we're going to put one wedge just on the heel. You don't have to do a lot, just maybe like a third on the heel, right here. And you're going to go ahead and stay heavy on the heel and slowly bring that knee forward, and just notice what happened to your body. Yeah. Does it start to migrate in a little bit? So now we have proper pronation mechanics returning into our body. Does our pelvis start to rotate down a little bit? And we won't get into the other planes, but we also will get a frontal plane hip hike. We also get a rotation towards this way. It's all happening with just proper foot mechanics here. Whoops. So this is the one exercise we're going to go through a lot today. Just this one move is the one move we use to probably treat, I don't know, shoulders, hips. A lot of issues can be corrected with one move, but it's just a nuance of how we show it. So for some of you that came over to us and had a session, you probably have done this move. And we play around the wedges to get you to feel different things. One foot in front of, like you're walking, move knee forward with the back knee locked. This leg is going to be locked because when you're walking, it's like boom, boom, boom. And then you push off and then you go. Heel contact, slowly bring your knee forward. That is a movement. We're going to play around with different wedges to help you experience this move a little bit differently. So what does all matter? I mean, restoring the feeling of closed chain mechanics is the key to unlocking the body. Like if it looks good, but it doesn't feel good, it's not enough for the nervous system to actually change. So some principles, remember, muscles react to joints. I said the muscles are really dumb. It doesn't really do much besides doing whatever the joint wants it to do. So if your joint's locked like this, you tell your bicep to shorten, it's not going to be able to, it's stuck. And what controls the joints? The nervous system. The nervous system it reacts to belief, sensation, and just a bunch of other different factors. So if you believe that it's unsafe to bring the big toe joint down because of some injury that you had 10 years ago, well, you're never going to be able to experience this. And your muscles, no matter how strong they are, you're never going to go into doing the work that they're supposed to. All right, so we'll start here. We did this, so we're going to do it on both sides. Let's say right foot, we're going to do a few without anything, and then we're going to bring a little bit of heel wedge and slowly go forward. And maybe you can slowly try to encourage the knee to drift a little bit towards the big toe. And see what happens. Try to keep your sternum straight ahead. So you try it with out the wedge, and then you try it with a green wedge underneath the heel. Kind of see what goes on. Okay, now, if you have a good amount of motion happening here in the rear foot, but there's no motion here, you're still not going to be able to experience this motion smoothly. So what we can do now, we could put a wedge in the forefoot now. Now as we bring it over, now we're encouraging these bones to open up right here. So you will put this just a little bit underneath here. And it's the same move. You're just going to go ahead and bring that knee forward and just allow that knee to slowly migrate towards
See how that makes it
the big
easier
toe.
for you?
And some of you guys might start to feel a nice stretch underneath your arch. That's your plantar fascia actually going to length. People try to stretch it with doing a calf stretch. They're never going to get there if they don't experience pronation. So if you want a true plantar fascia stretch, a little bit of wedge, a little bit of towel, or whatever it is, underneath the big toe joint area and going forward, that's when you would get it. Like so. And you guys can experience that on the other side. Just bringing that knee forward. But the whole time, make sure your heel stay on the ground. So if any of your 3 points of contact, your big toe joint, your little toe joint, or your heel comes off the ground, you lose closed chain mechanics because you need all 3 points for the foot to change shape. Good. And then now you can come out of the wedge and you can try it again and see if that feels different now. Do you feel like the foot trying to spread a little bit more? Do you feel that knee slowly drifting in a little bit more? Do you feel a little bit more anterior pelvic tilt? Do you feel a little bit more rib cage elevation? And these are ways you can play around. And of course, in a one-on-one setting, we can really be pinpoint about how we place these wedges. But I just want you guys to feel, okay, what happens to my foot and how that translates up the chain. 2 wedges together. So with 2 wedges together, we create this divot. If we have a wedge here, and if we have a wedge here, this is going to start tipping down, this is going to start tipping up, and now we're really opening up a lot of the joint space in the bottom. We're really doing this to the foot. So if you have really tight plantar fascias, this can be an excellent move to help open up right here. So you have a wedge on the forefoot, a wedge in the back. Same thing. Bring that knee forward. Just allow the whole foot to open up right here. Trying to keep that sternum forward. And you play around with the other side. Same thing right here. Bring that knee forward. And back. It splays out. Splays out.
Yeah. Need a little bit more.
There you go. Cool. Frontal plane wedges. What if a foot that can't tip over this way? We put a wedge on the lateral side here. That's going to tip the bone and the calcaneus inside.
Yeah.
Now you go forward. Now it's really going to encourage this knee to come in.
The outside. This way. Under heel here. Yeah.
And now we're opening up these tissues down here. So you want to create some length into the posterior tibialis, all of these smaller tissues down here. You do it this way. Now, you can also add a wedge here. You can add a heel wedge laterally and a forefoot wedge laterally. Now we get this twisting in the frontal plane here. Make sure we keep the back knee straight as you go forward. Just experiencing all these different ways that the feet can move. And for some of these, it might feel like awful for you. It might feel like this is like the worst thing ever for my foot. And for some of these positions, it's like, yo, this is like what I need. This feels good. Or like, this is a stretch I've been looking for that I haven't been able to find. And you can try a little bit on the other side. Boom. And the last wedge position, transverse plane. This happens to get a lot of motion all at once because it's not in the frontal, it's not in the sagittal, it's somewhere in between. So this one actually helps. We use this one quite often. This will be a 45 degrees out on the heel. So now you can go. So you can have the heel, and then you can also have the front one as well. So this is the heel. And if you want to have the front one, you just get a 45-degree angle on the front wedge. And now we're twisting that foot into pronation. And for me, I'm getting a nice stretch in my plantar fascia right now. And when I get that nice stretch, reflexively, I get a rebound of that plantar fascia. I'm getting an arch when I come back. So if you guys can look at me from the side, as I go forward, flange, as I bring that shin come back, the arch start to come up. It goes flat. And then as I bring my shin behind, if I stay on these wedges, the arch will suck up. So now we can start to effectively train the arch to go into a stretch and into an arch. Sternum up, sternum down. Supination wedge, this one's super easy. We put a wedge on the big toe joint, we put a wedge on the inside heel. And let's say we want to work on supinating the left foot, or whichever foot. You will stay here, and all you do is put the other foot into a pivot, and then you just rotate towards that same side where the wedges are. And what it's going to do, it's going to suck into that wedge, and you're going to be able to rotate a little bit more towards that side, and you're going to feel that arch start to come up, like so. For a lot of folks who can't supinate, a lot of time when they try to supinate, their whole entire foot comes off the ground. So these wedges just bring the ground up towards their foot for them to feel those contact points for effective supination to occur. Yeah, for baseball, for golf, you would need the supination pronation mechanics. If you're lacking in supination pronation mechanics, where else are you going to get your rotation from? Maybe rotating too much at the hip, maybe too much at the back, maybe too much somewhere else. But it all starts right here. And you guys can play around with the other side. It's perfect because I need some work on my foot. Good. And good. So as you supinate, the knee will lock out as you rotate towards it. So here we go. Make sure you straighten out your knee as you rotate towards that side. As you rotate towards that side. Yep, there you go. There you go. Excellent. And lastly, you guys ever heard of overpronation? This one is the dumping in of the foot. So let me see that. So a dumping in of the foot is when someone brings the foot over and everything just dumps super quickly. The whole thing comes over. And what we often see is that the pinky toe side, they start to come off the ground because there's too much pronation happening at once. This is the whole thing with the orthotics and what people try to correct. But what do we just fill in the gap? So if you're someone who overpronates, or you see someone whose foot really dumps over, if I put a little bit of wedging on the pinky toe side and then I go, now I'm not going to lose. So if I overpronate, I will go boom, and this will come off. And you ever seen someone squat or do lunges and they're overly like this? They come all the way in. You put a little bit of support right here, they'll just resort right back into the middle.
Have you ever seen like success of you putting like a wedging the medial rear foot if somebody's overpronating? Like to slow down.
No, that's a very nuanced one. Like if someone's, when this bone is moving quickly, too fast, too soon, we can't just put a wedge here and stop it from doing that. It's still going to encourage, it won't really work. But what we can do is put it like this. So it stops it from going down too quickly. So what that will look like, we're not going to go over this because it's a little more nuanced. It's like this. That would be how you would stop an overpronation from occurring. Because as soon as they go boop. You put it right here, it just prevents it from going so fast. So we changed the timing of these mechanics that's happening in the foot. And if they do this a couple of minutes and then you let go, they're like, oh yeah, much better. You can even have this on while they go into their split squats. And that's perfectly fine to do. Muscles. Once you understand couple motion here, you can really target any muscles you want. But we'll talk about plantar fascia. I mean, it connects underneath the foot. So if you get into proper pronation, you can stretch that out. So for your folks who feel like, oh, I got that plantar fasciitis, slip a couple of towels or wedges underneath there. Have them feel that stretch. They'll love you forever. Glutes. How do you give the glutes no choice but to contract? Well, you look at the glutes. It's going to put into maximum length in hip flexion, adduction, and internal rotation. What's that look like with the foot? Hip flexion, adduction, internal rotation. This is putting length into the glute, right? So if this is, you want to put length into the glute before you contract it. So what does this look like? If I put my foot down, that's a pronation mechanic of the glute. So I would argue that if you want your glute to work really hard, if you don't have pronation in your foot, it's going to be really hard to turn it on when you're doing things like squats and lunges and such. So if you guys would just, we're going to some split squats. So let's say we're going to put some wedges on to encourage pronation mechanics of the foot to get more glute. So we put a heel wedge on here, and we go down, and we slowly allow this knee to come inside and come back up, come inside, and come back up. Now we might just start to load into that glute a little bit more. Now for some of you, they might not be the proper wedge position. A little less than that.
Yeah, give yourself like a third here.
Just a little bit here. So I'm already feeling my glute. Now, you can try a little out to the side, 45 degrees. And then try it again, because now it might just encourage a little bit more coming in. 45 degrees. Out to the side. So now we might experience a little more length into the glute now as we go. Or you might go just put a little big wedge joint right here. If you find someone doing lunges and the big toe is coming off, now their knee's going like this. Now it's throwing off how much length they can get in the glute. You put that in now, and now you might start to feel a little more stretch into the glute. So here we go in the forefoot. Yeah. That would throw you away from what you want. There you go. And I'll end it with this one exercise. It's a boulder reach. That's a great exercise for the glute. And for this, I'm just going to have maybe like a 4-foot wedge like that. We'll start with a hinge. I'm going to reach forward with the other arm while staying in contact with that big toe joint and hinge into your body. So right now, so I see heel go right there. Your foot keep trying to go out the other way. So maybe for you, put a little wedge on the outside here. Just so we encourage everything to turn in. And then go move forward. And if you have that good pronation mechanics here, what you're going to feel is a nice stretch right into that glute. Right into that glute. Now here's a little experiment. Now if you go here and turn the knee out, you're not going to feel that glute the same way. It's not going to feel good. You're not going to load into that glute nearly the same way. You're not going to get that nice stretch into that area. You're not going to get that nice opening of that pelvis. So these are ways you can experiment with these wedges. If you understand that a pronation of the foot is correlated to a lengthening of the glute, then you can place the wedges that will encourage that shape and go into exercises that will give you that muscle to work. How you like that, Dan? Sweet. Yeah. So you remember how which side works really well for you? Those same wedge shape? Go into them with your split squats and such. I think you feel difference in how you would feel their body. So these wedges, I say they're like training wheels. You don't use them forever. You put training wheels on and you ride a bike. once you catch the rhythm of what the two wheels feel like and you feel good, you take those training wheels away because you want people to not rely on tools. How's it feel for you guys just going through these movements? And do you guys feel more of the glute, or you guys understand in your body? You guys feel different in your body when you're doing it?
I felt it in the quad first, but then I just hinged it a little more. I definitely felt it.
Yeah.
At first it was a little bit more quad, but then I just adjusted it.
Right, right. Yeah, so that's how we use the wedges to treat or to enhance performance for a lot of different clients, whether they need more certain muscles to engage. There's ways to find it using what we know over here. Now, to get good at these, I think the first thing you do is to feel it in your own body. Just play around with it back and forth, and it's like, oh, this feels different. Oh, this feels better. Oh, what am I getting here? And then you go into a lunge, you're like, oh, I feel more VMO, I feel more quad, and I feel more adductors. Does that happen in the pronation mechanics? These are things that you can kind of nerd out on.